Hi lovely people, my name is Emma and today I'm doing my July reading wrap up for all the books that I read in the month of July. So I read 11 books in total in the month of July, some of which were part of a readathon which I've already done a wrap up for that I will link down below. It was the reading rush that took place in the later half of the month. So today I'm just going to go in like reading order of the books that I finished. The first book that I finished was The Art of Rivalry by Sebastian Smee. This one I did start in June. There's a whole bunch of books that I started in June and then finished off in July, especially at the beginning of the month. This is non-fiction and it is about modern art and specifically some different kind of rivalries slash friendships within modern art and how the two artists impacted each other's work and modern art in general. So I gave this book 7 out of 10. I've moved out of a 5-star rating to a out of 10 rating because I think it gives me a little bit more breadth to explain some of my thought process a bit more. So we're trialing that. But yeah, 7 out of 10. Generally, I find with modern art books it can be quite difficult to fully grasp what the writer is on about because there are a lot of names, a lot of different titles, a lot of different movements, a lot of different isms. And you also fact that a lot of the artwork that they're talking about it's a visual medium. You know, we're talking paintings and sculptures and various things like that, which means that in a book that only has maybe 10 photos of like paintings or so, and it probably talks about a good 70 or 80 different pieces of work, it can be a little bit difficult to fully grasp what the author is on about because you don't get to see it. I had this same comment about a book I read a while ago, which is What on Earth Am I Looking At by Will Gomperst, which was a more expansive history of modern art, and you really need like Google images open when you're reading these. There were some parts that felt a little bit lacking in structure, and there were definitely some of the rivalries that were more interesting than others, but if you are somebody who has a little bit of a background in modern art, like I wouldn't call this an intro level book for the history of modern art, but it's definitely interesting if you have a general overview of the isms and are looking for a bit more information about particular artists. The 4 rivalries you know, in general within it are Degas and Monet, Picasso and Matisse, Pollock and de Kooning, and Freud and Bacon. So some really interesting comparisons there. Then I finished the Lord of the Rings Return of the King, which is the 3rd and final book in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I listened to this on audiobook like I had with the entire trilogy, and I had a really good time. Again, I started this one in June and it was really nice to finish it off. I think the criticism I have for it is fairly standard, as a lot of people have, which is like all the action happens and then the book still continues for like another 5 hours worth of audiobook because we wander back to Hobbiton and then find out that things have gone a bit bad and we have to like fight to get the Hobbit, the Shire, back from like the bad guys, and it just kind of drags a little bit at the end like it dragged at the beginning. So I definitely think that book 2 is my favourite, in the same way that the second movie is my favourite because it just has more going on in it. Having said that, it was a really fantastic read and I had a great time, so I gave this one 7 out of 10 as well, and I'm so pleased that I have done the entire trilogy and that I've kind of ticked that off because that was a goal of mine for my classics TBR and I wasn't too sure if I was going to get to all 3, and it was really nice to kind of binge listen to them over the course of 3 and a bit months and really finish it off. Then there was a read along in July which was hosted by Books Like Woe, and it was for The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo. This was to kind of pay homage to the cathedral, which did recently have a very dramatic fire that did a lot of damage, and the reason why The Hunchback of Notre Dame was originally written was Victor Hugo was trying to raise awareness for the cathedral, which was falling into disrepair, so it seemed very fitting. Mara from Books Like Woe's schedule was fairly intense. It involved reading about 50 to 60 pages per day in the run up to Bastille Day. I did not manage to maintain that, unfortunately, but I did finish it off afterwards, and I did a mix of audiobook and the physical book for this one. I really enjoyed this. I gave this 8 out of 10, which would be like a solid 4-star review. I had a good time, but none of the characters have a good time in The Hunchback of Notre Dame. It is a really depressing book where everything is just very tragic, but it's so beautifully written and Victor Hugo is such a way with words, and I think the translation of this is the Everyman Libraries classic edition. I think the translation's incredible, and if you can get past some of the odd chapters where Victor Hugo does go off on a tangent and give you histories of like Paris and architecture and the cathedral in general, if you can look past some of those, I think it's an absolutely fantastic story, and Victor Hugo is like king of the burns. He is so freaking funny. Some of the characters in this are so amazing, some of the dialogue is just so amazing, and it is one of these classics that I'm so pleased that I picked up and was prompted to do it by this read along, because I just don't think I would get to this in quite a while because it just wasn't really on my radar, and I had such a good time. It was so much fun. Then I did it. I finished Rumo by Walter Moers. This one again I started in June. This is 688 pages of book, which is essentially like almost double the size of your average paperback. It is insane. This is book 2 of Walter Moers' Zamonia world, which are like crazy fantasy stories set in the same world, but like the novels are completely distinct, like kind of episodic rather than being serialized. Think like Terry Pratchett. We get some similar kind of characters appearing, and this one in particular follows the story of Rumo, who is a Wulpiting, which is a weird wolf/human hybrid creature that is renowned for being absolutely incredible at fighting. So the first half of the story is Rumo finding his roots and going to the city of Wulpiting and finally getting to meet a bunch of other Wulpitings. It's very hard to say that with a straight face. It's a faintly ridiculous word to say. And then the later half is his experiences in the Netherworld. I read the first book of this series, 13.5 Lives of Captain Bluebear, a novel, way back when I was about 12 or 13. It was a present from my uncle and I absolutely adored it. And I was very concerned that this one wouldn't live up to the hype that I'd built up around Walter Moers, myself from only having read one of his books, but absolutely loving it and rereading like probably a good 50 times. As it was, my concerns were completely unfounded, which even though this was very different stylistically to Captain Bluebear and has a very different kind of plot device to it, and you know, is a very different story in its own right, it was so much fun. And Walter Moers has this amazing way of just crafting this ridiculously intense, huge, elaborate world, which all ties itself back together, and you go off on tangents at the beginning that you don't think are relevant, and then it comes back round to it, and it just is amazing. Such a good time. So many good books this month. It's been such a good reading month, and we love this one. I took this on the train with me. Can you imagine? Literally, it took up 2/3 of my handbag. I had this with me on a train. It's absurd. Okay, then I read The Versions of Us by Laura Barnett, and I gave this 9 out of 10. This has been one of those crazy, really surprising books that I honestly wasn't enjoying for what felt like the majority of it, and then the end came out of nowhere and just hit me like a train. It was absolutely insane. So this tells the story of Eva and Jim, and it's kind of a contemporary, but with a bit of a speculative fiction twist. And basically, it is 3 alternate universes like running parallel to each other, where Eva and Jim get together and then stay together, Eva and Jim get together and then break up due to Eva having a pregnancy with her previous boyfriend, and Eva and Jim don't quite get together. They like kind of bump into each other and lose and go past each other, and it's about how their lives intertwine. Sorry, I've got fluff on me, rabbit fluff. It's about how their lives intertwine and kind of those turning points in your life, and the idea of like missed opportunities, but the fact that they're not really missed. And one of the things that I really loved about this book was that no one of the particular timelines was like the right timeline. None of them were happier or sadder than any of the others. There was tragedy and heartbreak, but also immense moments of happiness in all 3 of the possible lives. And it was just really a commentary on like, if you feel like you've missed your chance, you probably haven't, and even if things are really bleak right now, it doesn't mean that they're not going to get better around the corner. But equally, if something is in a really good place right now, it doesn't mean that it can't collapse if you don't keep working at it. Honestly, at the 60% mark, I was borderline going to DNF this book. I didn't really care about the characters because it is a bit of a slow burn, because you've got 3 separate storylines that you're having to try and push forward at the same kind of rate. There's a lot of names going on in all the different storylines. You know, they have children and they give them different names, which does help you to differentiate the timelines, but it means it does get very confusing very quickly. So you do have to kind of focus, and I really wasn't feeling it, and I was so close to DNFing it, and then I was like, no, let's just push through, let's give it a chance, we're nearly done, let's give it some more time. And I literally, by the end of it, was sobbing, like absolutely uncontrollable, ugly crying on the sofa, having finished it off on a Sunday morning, just not being able to cope with anything. It was amazing, and new favourite book, and yeah, I absolutely adored it. Then the reading rush did occur, and I have, as I said, put out my wrap up for it, but I'm going to very quickly, for those of you who haven't seen that, run through a kind of my thoughts on the books that I read. So I finished 5 books for the reading rush readathon, and I DNF'd 1. So I read Journey to the Centre of the Earth. Did it in audiobook. Generally good fun, but Jules Verne's a bit long-winded. I did The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. Generally good fun, but not as strong as The Time Machine, just I think purely because of subject matter. I read Bird Box. Generally good fun, light-hearted despite its subject matter, a bit of body gore in here, so do be aware of that one, but generally was far more entertaining than I was expecting it to be. I read Animorphs, book 9 and 10, which was a excellent read, really, really chill, nice and easy because they are kids books, and is just continuing the series in such a strong vein. I have no complaints about the Animorphs series so far, absolutely fantastic. And then I started 20th Century Ghost, which is a short story collection by Joe Hill, but I DNF'd it because his style really hasn't evolved at this point. This was a debut novel, and I think that he can do much better much later, and life is too short to read books that you don't enjoy. And yeah, generally I don't like short story collections as is, so it was on to a bit of a losing start, to be honest. So those are what I did for the reading rush, and then since the reading rush has been over, I have finished one, and I am so close to finishing another one that I'm just going to include it in this wrap up today because I'm not waiting until the end of August to talk about it. The book that I finished since the end of the reading rush is Familiar Things by Hwang Sok Yong, and this has, again, is just, it's been such a good reading month. This was so good. It's one of those lovely, quiet, unassuming books that just like resonates with you for a really long time. Like, it's a very sweet, endearing read, but it has a real kind of punch at the end that you aren't particularly expecting. It's translated fiction set in Korea, and it is set on Flower Island, which is actually an island where all of the rubbish of the city gets dumped. And it tells the story of Bug-Eye, that's his nickname, he has a proper name but he goes by Bug-Eye, and his mother, who moved there to work as trash collectors. And what they do is they have to go through the rubbish and find things that can be sent off to recycling plants or to be sold on, and they live literally in a city of rubbish that is built out of trash. Linked within this, there is also some kind of underlying ghost and like Korean folklore kind of vibe to do with the people who used to live on the island, and it's just a really lovely, endearing look at this world through this 14-year-old's eyes, but also kind of a commentary on capitalism and modern day and consumerism and how much we throw away and what that means and where it ends up, and the act of owning things and what is really important. It was lovely and so easy to read, and I'd really, really, really recommend it, especially if you are trying to get into translated fiction a bit more, because this one is translated, but it was such a like breeze to read. I think that some people think that translated fiction can be very intense, and actually this really wasn't. And then the one that I'm in the middle of reading right now, and I would definitely have finished by either the end of tonight or beginning of tomorrow morning, but filming schedules and all the kind of things mean I'm just going to talk about it now, is The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells. Now, I was planning on getting to this in the reading rush and didn't quite get there, but did say in my wrap up that I would be prioritising this in the few days after the reading rush. I'm listening to this on audiobook at the moment and have been reading a few of the chapters here or there, like at work as well, kind of bouncing in between. This is now the third H.G. Wells I've read, and I love his writing. It's so descriptive and so much fun, and he has such cool ideas and playing around with different kind of sci-fi concepts, and like they're good books as is, but then when you think about the fact that he is one of these people who was like pioneering the sci-fi genre and doing things that had never been done before, they become like even cooler. This one follows a very standard H.G. Wells format that is kind of established by now, which is basically being told in some kind of epistolary novel kind of way, where it is somebody else's story being told to the reader. In this one, it is somebody telling the story of their uncle who gets shipwrecked and ends up on an island where these horrible, grotesque creatures are being made by pretty much a mad scientist. This has been the inspiration for so many different things in the past, including the scene in Spy Kids 2, if you remember that movie. And the idea is that this Dr. Moreau is desperately trying to create man out of animals and try and stamp out that animalistic instinct. It has really fascinating discussions about what it means to be man and what it means to be animal. I've got like 30% of it left, and there's definitely kind of a like turning point where the animals are about to kind of like almost seek revenge for the horrors that have been inflicted on them, and it is so much fun and so interesting, and I love H.G. Wells' style. I think it's incredible. It turns out I thought he'd only really wrote like 4 books. I've got The War of the Worlds to do, and then I thought I was done, but a quick look on his bibliography on Wikipedia reveals that the guy wrote like 50 books, so I might have to see if I can track down some of his lesser known ones. They're always really short as well, and I would really, 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 really recommend them if you are trying to get into classics, because it's just fantastic. The audiobook is amazing. Like, the narrator is cracking, and it's only about 5 hours long, so again, it's a wonderful one if you are kind of ticking off that light, easier read. So those are all the books that I read in the month of July. We have the August Newt's Magical Readathon starting tomorrow. I'm so excited. I have my readathon already set for that. It's going to be awesome. So yeah, that's pretty much it from me. Have you read any of these? What do you think? What's your favourite H.G. Wells? Have you read any of his other ones other than the like big 4? All the thoughts in the comments down below, and I will chat to you soon. Have a lovely reading week. Bye guys.